Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. So I typically don't make videos like this with this kind of mood and feeling towards a particular game, because most of the time I'm very passionate and happy to talk about what I'm playing at the moment, but right now I feel like I'm the polar opposite of that. So as you can see from the title of the video, this is basically my thoughts and impressions and review of Life is Strange Double Exposure. I recently got the chance to play it since it got added to PlayStation Plus Extra, and I just wanted to make this video to show you how I feel and why I feel the way I feel. Alright, so just be ready because I have a lot to say and I'm not sure how long this video will be, so let's just get right into it, okay? I'm not really too keen on Life is Strange Double Exposure. I sort of went into this game with a mostly positive mindset because I was quite happy to see Max Caulfield was back. I was happy to see her living sort of the dream life I think she would want to live, with her being a photographer in residence in some university in Canada and being able to make some kind of a career out of photography, especially considering how much she loved photography in the first game and how it kind of shaped the way the story was with her taking photos and all that. And with the game being called Double Exposure, I was curious to see how that would play a role. And yeah, it didn't quite live up to its name, nor was I really moved by the story. I think one particular thing that bothered me was just the game itself and the lack of consequence towards decision making. I think a lot of the time, I think we can all say this from the previous Life is Strange games, that a lot of the time when we make a decision, it oftentimes leaves an impact on the world that changes the outcome on a grander scale, basically. Like, I remember this one time, I think it was in Life is Strange 1, I believe, where, if I'm not mistaken, when the Arcadia Bay storm is about to hit, there is this homeless woman nearby the diner, and you can advise her to let her know that a storm is going to hit, and she'll basically take your advice and go seek shelter somewhere else. But if you don't tell her that, she'll get crushed by like a rock or something and instantly die. So it kind of feels personal in that sense, where you as the player feel like it's not just the character's fault, but your fault as the character for letting someone die. And Life is Strange Double Exposure, is pretty much the exact opposite of that. Decisions here have little to no consequence, and a lot of the time, especially considering, personally speaking, I played the game 2 times making the opposite decisions, and a lot of the time I saw very little impact towards that choice. Alright, sometimes there'll be a slight difference in dialogue here or there just to show some slight demeanor or emotional changes, but in terms of the overarching narrative or even the subplots, it more or less stays the same. I think the first time I began to notice how little your choices actually had an impact towards the story was in this one section of the game. I believe it's in the second chapter, where Vince Alderman, I believe his name is, kind of like the detective or the cop guy who suspects Max of messing around with, being the suspect of Safi's murder and all that. You get a choice to either accept his card or not accept his card, and regardless of whether or not you accept or don't accept this card, he doesn't really have much of an impact on the story overall, and it just kind of goes on. Like, it has no real impact, and it's kind of underwhelming considering the weight of our decisions is like drastically decreased in this game, or almost has no effect whatsoever. You'd think that when the game puts you in a situation where the scene completely pauses and forces you to pick between two options, which are like giving you as much time as possible to think very deeply about it, which is exactly how I played the game, because I took my time to think about every single one of these big decisions that I thought were big but weren't, and a lot of the time they just came out to absolutely nothing. And it's just a real shame, because a lot of the time these games are significantly meant to be driven by the weight of your decisions and everything it entails towards the story, but that just was not the case with Life is Strange Double Exposure. Moving on, another thing I wasn't too keen on was Max's power. Alright, so in the first game, Max's power was very intuitive. It was very in line with what a teenager would want to do at that time, and just like having that ability to just undo your way through life or autosave your way through life, to just undo a decision that you were not happy with, and just adapt from that point forwards, was very, very cool. This power, however, this I don't know what to call it, like a timeline switching power. I can't even remember how they described it in the game, because the game barely emphasized on this. But yeah, I'm just not a fan of this power. A lot of the time when this power is used, it's mostly used as a way to pause the time in one timeline, switch to another to pick up an object or interact with something very simple, and then come back to the same timeline just to do a simple task once again. It just ends up feeling very washed down and almost like a fetch quest, like between two dimensions, and it kind of ruins the pacing of the game, because a lot of the time you're gonna think like, oh, okay, fine, I'm stuck on this part here, let me find the nearest bubble for me to teleport myself to the other world. And you do that, and then you look around a bit longer, and then you're like, okay, fine, now the thing's progressed, so then go back to the bubble again, go back to the other timeline, and then see what effect it had. And I guess for those people who like really enjoy seeing the difference between two timelines, it can be intriguing, but for me it just felt so repetitive and dull. I think that's the best way to say, just very dull and boring, and it just kind of ruined the pacing of the overall exploration. And a lot of the time I just felt like, to some extent, it also made the game easier, because whenever I ran into an issue, I would either pulse by clicking L1 or R1, whatever it was, or I would just find the nearest zone for me to shift to the next timeline. And that sort of just watered down the entire experience, especially for the puzzles. I know Life is Strange games aren't really known for the puzzles, but hey, like, this really just felt cookie cutter and bland, and a lot of the time I just was trying to push the story forward by listening to the dialogue and finding whatever way I can to just move on, because I felt so uninspired by these sections where you can just explore the world. And speaking of exploring the world, this might be a hot take, and honestly I don't know if any other reviewer has mentioned this before, but personally speaking, I'm not a very big fan of the open world sections in Life is Strange games. Like, I know there was quite a few of them in True Colors, and there's even more of them here in Double Exposure. Now, what I mean by these open world sections, I don't really mean it's like this like massive Witcher 3 style open world section, obviously not, but it's these sections of the game where you can basically explore an area, and this area would like lead into other smaller areas with some characters that you can talk to, kind of like these small hub worlds like in the Yakuza games, but significantly smaller and with much less detail also. And personally speaking, I'm not a fan of them. I think they are just kind of unnecessary for what is meant to be like a very story driven game, where I think a lot of the ability to tell the story is, unless you're watching a cutscene of course, a lot of the ability to convey a story is done by an interaction that players can do or have with the world around them. So something I noticed a lot from especially the older games like Life is Strange 1, Before the Storm, and 2 was that these open world sections were not that common there, but a lot of the time the scope was quite limited, which was good because it allowed the developers to make these areas or small house sections in the games where it was very highly detailed. Every single part of the building or furniture or posters on the wall all told their own story, and it just felt like it made the world feel so rich. Okay, Life is Strange Double Exposure is pretty much the exact opposite of that. The world does not feel rich. I'm not a fan of Caledon University. It looks so uninspired and boring, and it just reeks of like creative bankruptcy to me. Yeah, I'm not a fan of the open world section. I feel like they should just focus on making it more linear, add more value to the sections that Max can explore in, and allow it to just propel, make the player feel curious. Okay, don't just make them walk around some empty area. Give them like a bench to sit on so they can enjoy the music. Like that's so cute and all, but I don't know. Like Life is Strange games to me have always been about the narrative, and they just end up taking a lot away from the story, in my opinion. Speaking of the story itself, I don't know if maybe this was just me or other players feel the same way, but I know Max herself definitely feels this way. A lot of the time, I just wasn't a fan of the way how Max communicated with her power or conveyed her sentiment towards what was going on in the world. Because a lot of the time, Max herself is quite confused and unsure of what's going on. Now, of course, I mean, I would be confused too if, like, my friend died and I had access to some random timeline because I have this power that was manifesting in me or went away from me and now I'm just getting it back or whatever. But like, it kind of feels strange to me playing this game with a protagonist that has no idea what's going on or what's happening or how things are unfolding or how she ends up in these very bizarre situations. And like, I think that comes back to my main point, which I was trying to make, is that because Max herself is so confused and curious about all this, it kind of just puts the story itself in this very strange position where, like, we don't really know what the end goal of all this is. It's like Max kind of wants to find out why Safi died on the first in chapter 1 of the game, and she uses her power to, like, bridge the gap, so to speak, between the alive timeline and the dead timeline. And a lot of the time, I'm like, I just don't get it. Like, the way the game was marketed, it was like some kind of a murder mystery, but as time goes on, it's more like Max is just trying to live two lives in two different timelines, and somehow, some way, because of the way the story unfolds, the two timelines don't really play as much of a role anymore. And somehow, towards the end of the story, if you've played it, you know that Max finds a way to enter the storm and merge the two timelines into one and somehow sort the situation out. And in the middle of all this, we find out Safi has her own power, which is shape-shifting, right? And a lot of the time, I feel like the game could emphasize more on the powers and just how they're meant to be used to achieve a goal that they want to convince the player they need to strive towards. Because a lot of the time with this game, it's like I'm just living Max's life through her eyes, and I don't really know what I'm doing or why I'm doing it. But because of all the confusion and obscurity with everything, we just kind of go along with it to see if we'll eventually get an explanation for everything. But the end goal of the game was just not what it was. On the contrary, Life is Strange 1, 2 and True Colors all had like a very clear plot from the start to the finish on what the player was expected to achieve, right? In Life is Strange 1, you're this little girl who wants to figure out her powers and use it to hopefully stop the storm or whatever is approaching Arcadia Bay. In Life is Strange 2, even very simpler in fact, it's two brothers trying to make it their way to Mexico so they can live a good life. And in True Colors, you play as this girl who also has powers, but is trying to use them to figure out why this corporation somehow led to the death of her brother. It's pretty clear that each of these games have a very straightforward plot that communicate to the player what they're expected to achieve and how they can possibly get there. Life is Strange Double Exposure is like the polar opposite. It's like each chapter is its own subplot, and a lot of the time these subplots don't contribute to the overarching narrative. And that's a very key point of why the narrative of Double Exposure was so weak and unconvincing. So the ending of Life is Strange Double Exposure, assuming I understood what happened in the ending, I mean, I know there's a lot of theories and like guesses to what happened, but we learned that Safi, as I just said, is a shapeshifter, and she can turn into anyone she meets IRL. And she devised all these plots to take revenge on her friend Maya, to basically avenge Maya, sorry, misspoke there. And a lot of the time, after having some conversations with Lucas, I believe, she kind of pins all the blame on her mother, Yasmin, and then it ends up becoming this point where she just can't control her powers anymore. She turns into multiple people, and Max had to step in to either I don't know, I guess she had to hurt Safi or something like that, or talk her out of it. Not that it has any effect on the game, because Safi still shoots her own mother in the shoulder nonetheless. And that's kind of really underwhelming to me, because we never really learned exactly what Yasmin did. I know Yasmin was not the best mother. Like, we heard that she kept Safi away from her father when they got separated and all that. But I just wish we learned more. Like, if this game had taken its time to flesh out its characters more, give us more backstory, maybe allow us to just appreciate the duality of some characters. Like, like Life is Strange 1, we had like Chloe's dad, who was always this, like this tough guy who Chloe didn't very much like, but at the end of the day he was kind of being protective, and you can see that in him. I just did not get that impression with Yasmin, because she's just so one-sided in her character that you can't really tell what she's about, or whether or not Safi's emotions towards her were justified. And that kind of just culminated in a very weak and an ending that just did not sit right with me, because I did not feel anything too deeply towards it. At the very end of the game, I believe you're given a choice where you have to pick to either support Safi or not support Safi. So, like, this choice was rather weird to me, because I played this 2 times, right? And on both occasions when I played them, I picked 2 different options, and nonetheless the ending is more or less the same. It's just Safi walks away. Either she walks away as Max or she walks away as herself. Nonetheless, it's like, what impact does it have on our main character in the short term? We do not know, because she just walks away and Max is left to help Safi's wounded mother in that very moment, which is just kind of like, like, I feel sorry for her, but at the same time I don't care that much, because these characters just don't feel very developed or even human for that matter. And then, like, I think the real showstopper was just that really cringy, corny Marvel Cinematic Universe type thing, where Safi came back and tapped Diamond on the shoulder and was like, hey, I'm gonna recruit more people who have powers, and I think you're one of them because your nose is bleeding or something like that. I don't know, like, it just has this very weird, cheap, uninspired like outlook towards it, where they want to make a sequel, but at the same time they want to bring Safi back into it, because they knew that there were so many loose ends they still had to tie up with this game, and they just couldn't do it in the time that they were allowed, or in the 5 chapters that we played through. And it really is quite disappointing to see how little our decisions had on the overall story, and how disconnected I felt with all the characters in the end. Like, speaking of the characters, by the way, I got this impression, like, I think halfway through my playthrough, where I realized that a lot of the characters in Life is Strange Double Exposure are just like sort of versions of characters from Life is Strange 1, okay? So this might sound a bit strange, but just hear me out, okay? So Life is Strange 1 and Life is Strange Double Exposure has characters reflecting other characters, okay? For example, Max is Max, no question about that. Safi is kind of like Chloe because of how emotionally outbursting she is and how explosive she is in how she does things, and I think the game describes her as like, a flying brick, so to speak, and that's exactly what Safi and Chloe are. And also, who else? There's Loretta. Loretta reminds me a lot of that Victoria Chase girl from the first game. They both have that kind of like obnoxious humor to them, and that high and mighty stance to them, with like the popular girl syndrome, so to speak. Yeah, as you can tell, I'm not a fan of either of those characters. Then you've got Vince Alderman, which is like the detective. He reminds me a lot of the guy who played I think he's the photographer. I think his name was like, oh man, I forgot his name, but he's that teacher, Max's photography teacher from the first game, and he reminds me so much of that very same guy. I'm sure you guys know him, the guy with the beard and the glasses. I'm sure you know him. And then the real kicker, which actually tied everything together for me, was Maya. Now, Maya is not a character we really directly see in Life is Strange Double Exposure, except for that one time they show her face in the projector during the final chapter of the game. But Maya, to me, is pretty much another version of Rachel Amber from Life is Strange 1, because they're both technically deceased. We don't know much about them. We just know that they had a connection with someone that's also in the main cast to the current game. And that to me, just like, they're like mirror reflections of each other. And typically, like, this kind of storytelling is not bad. Like, there's no shame in taking inspiration from something you previously did and just reskinning it. But this is more than just reskinning it. This is just like changing the name of a character, giving them the exact same background but with a few different twists to it, and then just presenting it as the exact same storyline again, and just wanting that, like, for example, in Life is Strange 1, we really wanted Rachel Amber to get justice. Similarly, Maya is in this exact same position in Double Exposure, and that's what we're working towards at the end of the game. And it kind of like obscures the plot of the main game itself, because at some point it's a murder mystery, then it's Max just trying to figure shit out, and at some point it becomes us trying to avenge Maya. Like, I feel like the goalposts are moving very often, and I'm just not a fan of that. So a lot of the ending, as well as the small subplots along the way, just culminated very poorly in the end, and it just doesn't feel like something that was made with as much thought process or like any passion or love that went into this. It feels soulless. It really does feel soulless, which is really sad to say for a Life is Strange game. Anyway, let me not get too negative. There are some positives I did enjoy about the game. With it being I think this must be the first Life is Strange game that we're getting natively on the PS5 or current gen hardware, so to speak. I was actually very impressed by the overall performance and visual quality of the entire game. Like, no joke. I know True Colors was held back a bit by the PS4 version, and also it took some time for it to get the 60 FPS patch, if I remember correctly. I think it launched with only 30 FPS. I might be wrong about that, but I really enjoyed what I saw with Double Exposure. The facial animations, the graphics, the character models, the lighting, everything was just so well done. I had some minor issues with like the level of detail, because sometimes when the camera pans out you can see close by textures taking a moment to load in, and further away textures taking even longer to load in, but I think that's a pretty natural thing with most games, so it didn't really bother me too much. But yeah, I don't know how they did it. I know Unreal Engine 5 is really good for these kinds of stuff, but the motion capture, the facial animations, just the way how characters move and talk to each other and wink or lift their cheek, or just even these minor motions like point fingers or move their shoulders left to right, it's all done very, very well, and I'd like to see that level of quality maintained in future Life is Strange games. Speaking of future Life is Strange games, by the way, I am well aware that we did get a new Life is Strange game, Reunion. I have not played it yet, but I plan to play it eventually. I'm in no rush to actually play that because, well, Double Exposure left a pretty bad taste in my mouth, and yeah, I'm already kind of well aware that I think Chloe comes back in that game by some weird way, and it's going to be explained in the game. I assume it's something to do with the timelines getting merged and Chloe somehow comes back to life no matter what. But yeah, it's just kind of strange that I assume they were developing Reunion at the same time they were developing Double Exposure, so this was a plan all along to bring back Chloe. It's just a real shame that they kind of had to taint the story by taking Max to Caledon and doing whatever it is happened in the story and introducing us to all these forgettable characters. Yeah. Oh yeah, by the way, speaking of characters, I just want to say the only side character that really interested me was probably Moses. Like, she felt, pardon me, not she, he felt like a very human character. I liked the way he spoke with Max, the bond that him and Max shared, even despite the hardship they faced when there was that plot twist at the end of chapter 2 where Max was somehow revealed to be the killer because she had the gun pointed at Safi in that last photograph she took. That all was like so well done to me. I like the bond that they shared. It was sort of back and forth, and it felt very human nonetheless, because Moses was of course suspicious of Max for that, as anyone would be. It was a natural reaction to have, and that natural reaction just added a lot of life to this game in that very moment. I felt like Max herself was pretty good in her own way, but it's just a shame because she is the main character and the main plot didn't quite move me, so naturally neither did the character herself. So yeah, the side characters themselves are quite weak. I think Gwen, Moses, yeah, just Gwen and Moses would have to be the only characters that somewhat left an impression on me and made me think and have a sense of duality to them that made me feel like, okay, this is a lot deeper and not just and more refined and not just black and white the way the other characters are. And yeah, it's just a real shame that the side characters didn't quite carry their weight the way they did in the previous Life is Strange games. Aside from that, speaking of the endings of the chapters, right? I have to say, if there's one thing that they did do right in terms of the narrative, is they knew very well how to keep us hooked for the next chapter. All right, like I can understand why the Ultimate Edition of the game allowed you to play only chapters 1 and 2, because that ending of chapter 2, where what's her name, Max, is revealed to be the killer, really had me hooked. Like moments like that are what make Life is Strange games feel as impactful and addicting as they are meant to feel. Like when I saw that photo show up of Max holding the gun at Safi, like that got me thinking, like, whoa, what just happened? How is this possible? Why is it like this? And it just made me want to play chapter 3 all the sooner. So yeah, overall they really did a good job with the cliffhangers, that's for sure. Also, another thing I want to rant about would be the Ultimate Edition of the game. So, as I'm sure we all somewhat know about this, Life is Strange Double Exposure had 3 versions. There was a standard version, the digital deluxe version, and the Ultimate Edition version, right? So the Ultimate Edition version came with 2 weeks early access to chapter 1 and 2, I think, and more importantly, it came with probably the most redundant, irrelevant, and worthless DLC I have seen in gaming history to date. Okay, like this might actually be worse than the horse armor DLC from Oblivion. Okay, and that horse armor didn't even provide any health or protection to the horse. It was just purely cosmetic, just like this. Okay, and I'm talking about the cat DLC. The cat DLC, from what I've seen online, is not worth whatever money that Square Enix is charging right now. Okay, like I feel sorry for anyone who spent their money thinking that would be worth it, right? Like it's so ironic to me that this Life is Strange game, which is also maybe the most predatory entry into the franchise with its numerous additions and early access and DLC and costumes and cosmetics, is also the Life is Strange game that seems to have financially performed the worst in light of just how badly it reviewed and how much it cost Square Enix to make, in light of all the efforts they went through to just gouge as much money as they possibly could with this particular rendition of the game. It's kind of sad because I just don't get it. Like, Life is Strange games to me have always been about the story and everything that it entails, but these weird additions like the costumes and the cat DLC added no value whatsoever. They're just purely there for the sake of being there, and honestly, like, I'm just kind of disappointed that we didn't just get these things for free. Like, I can understand adding having a digital deluxe edition with some extra costumes or whatever, but this is just way too much. Like, you can just tell that Square Enix really wanted to bank off nostalgia by bringing Max back into the picture, but also wanted every single dollar out of us to bank on that nostalgia by making us fork up more cash by buying these worthless digital and Ultimate Editions. Like, yeah, it's just a real shame, and I wish it never existed in the first place. Moving on, I'm almost done with this video, by the way. I also want to talk about the Platinum Trophy for this game. So this Life is Strange entry it definitely has the worst Platinum journey of all the Life is Strange games. Okay, the whole enjoyment to me as a trophy hunter, but also someone who likes to play games for fun, was Life is Strange games were perfect for this, because they basically allowed you to earn all the trophies of the game in a single playthrough by just doing collectibles. This is not the case with Double Exposure, however, because with Double Exposure you need to do 2 whole playthroughs from start to finish just because you made a certain different decision at the very start of the game for whether or not you or Chloe broke up or Chloe passed away or something, depending on what your choice was from Life is Strange 1, obviously. I just find this so redundant because this feeds directly into my previous point about how decisions lack any form of consequence. I can understand wanting to incentivize players to play the game again to see a different ending or see how they can twist the story or whatever, but this entire journey for earning that trophy called Bay or Bay was so redundant to me, because in light they actually shot themselves in the foot, because this actually exposed to me just how little change there was in choosing different dialogue options or whether or not Chloe is dead or alive. Like, I know that there's some slight changes where Chloe can text you and stuff like that, and the picture on the wall is different in Max's room, but these are just such very minuscule changes that don't really have an effect on the story. So yeah, I was not a fan of the Platinum journey for this. It took a long time, way longer than it was meant to take. And despite the story itself being maybe the shortest Life is Strange story aside from Before the Storm, it just felt so mentally draining for me to go through it. And there was also the miscellaneous trophies like romancing every single person in the room or whatever. That was okay, but I just don't see the point in that either. I guess it's one way to incentivize players to play the game more or see the other romances, but nonetheless it has very little impact on the overarching narrative, which is what we Life is Strange fans are known to savor. So yeah, the Platinum journey was just not it. So with all that being said, I'm a bit nervous for the future of Life is Strange. I think it's just really sad to see how the franchise has come to this level, especially considering they had to bring back Max into this. Like, if you're gonna bring back a character from the first entry into the main line of the game, you need to come up with a very solid and convincing reason to bring them back, and this just was not it. All right, I know in the recent years there's been like a shift in developer leadership and all that. The previous games were, aside from True Colors, were made by Don't Nod, which is a French company, and these other games like True Colors as well as Double Exposure were made with Deck 9. So I mean I don't know much about Deck 9 themselves, but it's pretty clear to me that Deck 9 is maybe not the most competent developer when it comes to Life is Strange. And of course, they did make Life is Strange Reunion as well, as I'm sure we're aware, and I'll get to that game eventually, I'm sure. But it's just a real shame to see that like the new developers don't really know how they are doing this or what core Life is Strange fans really want from this. And I don't know. I don't know if it's. I'm not sure what the deal is behind the scenes. Whether or not Don't Nod can make another Life is Strange game. I know Square Enix probably owns the IP or something, and it's probably Square Enix that are pulling the strings behind what's happening and all the predatory practices with the Ultimate Edition and all that. But it's just a real shame that we can't have the original developers of the game make this again. So going forward, my advice, putting aside whatever happens in Reunion, if we ever do get another Life is Strange, I think the best thing to do is to just leave Max and Chloe and Safi and whoever else behind and just make an entirely new game. A new world, new power, new main characters, kind of like how they did with Life is Strange 2 and True Colors. Give us something new and fundamentally different from what we're used to, and stop going back to the previous characters that you've already done a good job building up, and just to tear them down for a sequel. Okay, that's just not justifiable. So yeah, make a new game, bring in new characters, create a new plot, and learn from what made Life is Strange 1 as well as 2. 2 is my favorite game, by the way, like my favorite Life is Strange game. Go back to them and see where things went wrong and bridge those gaps to make a better version of what you can make with the Life is Strange game, because Life is Strange has so much potential, especially now in today's world with all that's going on and how we feel. And I just hope that another generation of players, especially considering that we're going to we're on PlayStation 5 now, we're going to PlayStation 6 soon enough. I just want to see Life is Strange have an effect on a new generation of gamers, so that we can all just appreciate how we felt back when Life is Strange, the original Life is Strange came out, or when Life is Strange 2 came out, or even True Colors for that matter, because those games were also quite good in their own way. And yeah, I believe that's all I have to say for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed my review, rant, impressions or whatever. I'm not usually used to making these kinds of videos, but hopefully you guys saw some value in that. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed my video, be sure to leave a like on it. If you did not, you know what the dislike button is for. So yeah, thank you guys so much for listening, and I shall catch you guys in the next one. Bye bye.